Alright, so we're diving right into phase 2 of our ZX10 build for this season, and that is all about ergonomics and control. Rear sets and clip-ons and throttle tubes, because we're going to cover that, and even windscreens aren't nearly as glamorous as things like full M4 exhaust systems and ECU flashing and dyno tuning. But if you're not comfortable on the bike and you can't properly input controls, well, you're going to be slow as shit. With the stock components on the bike, being the stock rear sets and the stock clip-ons, you can't change the rider triangle in any meaningful way. The rider triangle is the points of contact of you actually on the bike. So you've got your hands at the clip-ons, you've got your ass on the seat, and obviously you've got your feet on the rear sets. So obviously I'm an orangutan at 6'9", which means I don't fit on anything properly. So we are going to replace the stock clip-ons with some Woodcraft 0-degree offsets and the rear sets with some Vortex V3 rear sets. Now, this is the completed right side rear set to the brake side. Obviously you need to get creative with mounting up your reservoir somewhere, but besides that, this is complete. In my personal opinion, the adjustability you have on these guys, because you have two different mounting peg positions and you have 360 degrees of rotation for you, where you can actually rotate the peg, you just can't really beat the adjustability of the Vortex V3s. And obviously on the foot peg side of things for the rear brake, you have two different positions. I've set it to the forward one, but actually rotated it back. That's just about where my foot ends up landing naturally. And this is the completed left side. Now, obviously there's a bolt here that doesn't match the rest of them. I don't know why. There's one bolt missing out of this kit, but it doesn't really matter. I don't care. We've got tons of spare hardware in the shop, so no big deal. The left side is actually a little easier to set up than the right side because there's no rear brake to deal with, and the shift linkage is easy. Vortex gives you a fresh shift rod that you can actually put in several different positions, depending upon if you want to run standard or GP shift, along with the necessary hardware to run GP shift. There's this stuff right here, but I'm actually not worrying about that at the moment because I still run standard shift the majority of the time. Most of our customer bikes are standard shift, and my brain just simply doesn't like going back and forth. Anytime you're setting up the left side rear set on any bike with a quick shift or an auto blipper, there is one very important thing to pay attention to. We see it all the time here in the shop when it's done wrong, and it always causes issues. And that is this angle here between the actual shift rod and the quick shifter, and the actual shaft itself needs to be as close to a 90 degree as you can possibly get. It's not 90 degree, you're actually putting uneven forces on the sensor itself, and you get all kinds of cool misshifts and false neutrals, and it's a giant pain in the ass. So just make sure that's lined up with 90 degrees. You can easily do it with all the adjustability of these rear sets, and you're good to go. Alright, so now that we're done with the rear sets, we are going to move on to hand controls. So we're going to talk about clip-ons and actually the throttle tube, which is one of my single biggest gripes with these bikes with the new throttle-by-wire systems. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So this slop right here irritates the shit out of me. On the old cable throttle systems, even though they were electronic throttle, you could adjust the cable slack to take out all of this play and fidgetiness. You can't really tell the difference between 0% and 5% throttle on here because there's just so much slop. And it's just not, honestly, an accurate way to give any kind of throttle input onto the bike, especially if you're ever going to be on the track. Now luckily, our good friends at Graves actually have a solution for this issue. This is a Graves throttle tube for this bike. I've actually already got it mounted up to a grip that's been safety wired because, well, I stole it off of Adam Robards' spare parts bin. With their grip, all of that dead air and all that slack and all that free play that just sits there and jiggles around on the stock throttle tube is completely gone. Now, once you get all this crap apart and you've got it all just kind of laying here on the top of the frame, and you've got your first bar off and you're getting your clip-on on, is take your time to do just one very simple thing. And that is drill your fucking bars. I can't even begin to tell you how many people come on in that have just busted off that little locating tab, and now all of a sudden when this thing is assembled on the bar, it just rolls around because there's nothing to hold it in place. It'll take you an extra 5 minutes to mock it all up, and then just drill a hole. It's not rocket science. And once you're done, when you go to actually use the controls and press a button, you're not going to have this thing just rolling around on the bar on you. And like I said, with that Graves throttle tube installed, the throttle slack now is virtually non-existent, which is perfect. You're obviously never going to eliminate it entirely, but it is virtually gone. I mean, that is just about nothing. And that'll allow you for much more precise throttle control, especially when you're trying to go from 0 to maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%, just as you're coming out of the corner on the track. Okay, so the last thing we're going to address here tonight on this bike is the windscreen. And we've got a Zero Gravity Corsa right here, which is about the tallest windscreen you can get. You can get a touring one, but it looks kind of funky. It is going to be massively better than the stock one, because I don't know about you guys, but I can't get behind the stock one to save my life. Maybe if you're 4'11" and legally a midget, you can actually get your head behind this thing, but for most of us, there's just not enough real estate there to get a helmet underneath there at all. Alright, so now that we've got the windscreen on, the Woodcraft clip-ons, the Vortex rear sets, this thing feels massively more comfortable for me. And I can actually get my head, and a helmet when I've got one on, underneath that frickin' windscreen. Now, be aware that especially with the clip-on and the rear set configuration, because obviously there's no adjustability of a windscreen, this is really personal preference. The only thing I can give you as a pro tip, so to speak, is to make sure that you have proper lever alignment. So if you're up in your aggressive, on bike position, you've got a nice straight line from your shoulder to your elbow, down across your wrist and over your fingers, so you have a nice pointed finger when it comes to grabbing the brake and the clutch. Other than that, everything from how wide you want your bars to how much you want them tucked in is all trade-offs and comes down to rider comfort. The further out you have the bars, the more leverage and control you'll have when you're trying to lean off the bike, but you'll also be more of a wind sail, so to speak, and not be quite as aerodynamic when you're in a tuck trying to go down the straightaway with your bars out here where I like them, versus if you're tucked in a little bit tighter. Now, the same thing goes for the rear sets. You need to be able to easily get to and properly manipulate both the rear brake and the shifter, obviously, regardless if you have it in GP or standard shift. I don't care to get into the argument of which is better. Just be able to properly work the shifter and easily reach it, and then get back onto the ball of your feet on that peg and be able to get your heel onto the guard there, so when you're coming off the bike, you can still easily transition and get to those controls. As far as the actual position of the peg itself, I don't have mine quite all the way down, because I know in the furthest down position from experience that they do like to drag a little bit. But obviously I've got stupidly long legs, so I do my very best to try to ease the angle here, which allows me to use more of my quad instead of when I'm tucked all the way up like this and don't really have any leverage. I can actually get some muscle mass behind this thing when I want to weight the pegs and start to navigate a corner. All right, so that's it for this evening, folks. That wraps up phase 2 of the ZX10R build for our 2023 season. Again, we just went over ergonomics. We talked about the clip-ons, we talked about the rear sets, we talked about the throttle tube, talked about the windscreen, the basics and fundamentals of being able to get comfortable on the bike and properly manipulate the controls so you can go fast. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give us a like, subscribe would be great. And if you ever have any questions about getting your bike properly tuned, dialed in, built, anything you possibly need, give us a call, shoot us an email, support@dynoworks.com. We're always happy to help.